Buddy, if folks could find a seat, that would be great. We're not allowed to have folks standing in the aisle. And with that, I welcome everybody to the Boulder City Council business meeting of July 16th, 2019. Thank you, Mark. Stefan?
I have to run real quick. I'll be right back.
And then Stacy, if you could be ready.
Hello, council members. I'm Stefan Vandermersch, 907 12th Street. Lower Chautauqua's beloved Marpa House, a beautiful contemplative group residence, is under contract for sale to developer John Kirkland. Kirkland is associated with a handful of small luxury student housing projects on the Hill. In just the past 2 years, public records show Kirkland's prior projects have attracted the following crimes: third-degree assault, public urination, underage sale and consumption of alcohol, nuisance parties, trash accumulation, weed and brush overgrowth, criminal mischief, and unreasonable noise. Kirkland's other properties are smaller than Marpa House. Turning Marpa House into student housing would set off a cultural bomb that will destine several blocks of Lower Chautauqua to the gradual decay of overgrown yards and deteriorating historical buildings that already characterizes several blocks on the Hill. A large part of the Lower Chautauqua neighborhood will become no longer fit for families. Kirkland personally has recently served jail time here in Boulder for contempt of court. It seems to me that this is not the type of developer who should be allowed a free hand in redeveloping a cultural gem in Boulder. Kirkland's proposed project is, in my opinion, predatory, putting 16 three-bedroom luxury student apartments into Marpa House, a group residence that meets low-income housing thresholds, has historically had fewer than 40 residents, and which lies atop 2 single-family lots zoned RL1. I believe this proposed project shows contempt for our neighborhood and our city. If allowed, Kirkland's return on investment will be funded in the decline of quality of life, property values, and historical heritage of our community. If it comes to City Council to review the future of Marpa House, I deeply hope that the council can limit such an individual from creating a large magnet for criminality in the middle of a family neighborhood in downtown Boulder. There are many better uses for this property, such as low-income housing, a thoughtful we live type entrepreneurship community, or best of all, that is stay as Marpa House. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, just a note to the audience to stick around at the end when council will comment and staff will give updates on various topics, including some that have been raised so far.
And that's the end of public comment in about 40 minutes.
Yeah, so we're not going to talk to you as we go, but we'll talk to you at the end.
Hi, my name's Stacy Silverstein Apple. I live at 805 16th Street, and I'm going to piggyback on what Stefan said. In its current use, Marpa House embodies the values that Boulder holds dear and the values that we aspire to as a community. It provides affordable housing for a number of residents who could otherwise not afford to live in our city. It is a communal, cooperative living at its finest. It is culturally diverse, and with its bountiful garden and the limited number of automobiles there, it really allows its residents, or shows that its residents live lightly off the earth. Though I know you can't decide who purchases this, my hope is that you will work with the planning committee to make sure that whatever happens to Marpa House, it doesn't have a negative impact on the neighborhood, as Stefan said. One that increases trash, increases noise, that reduces affordable housing. This would just be a tragedy, not just for the neighborhood, but for Boulder when we have such a gem. So I hope you'll take that into consideration, and thank you for your time.
All right. Beta and then Allie Catherine.
Hi, my name is Vida Waters, and I wanted to just start by thanking City Council for all the work that you do on behalf of Boulder. I am a resident of Boulder, and I'm here to request that you do not allow an expansion of the nonconformity being requested by the potential developer for the property on 12th Street called Marpa House currently. I'm making this request because as a Boulder resident and as a resident of the greater Chautauqua neighborhood, I understand the many benefits of Marpa House in its current use. As a contemplative community, it brings great calm and tranquility to the neighborhood. It provides affordable housing and much needed diversity in Boulder. And its doors are open to the public, so it is a resource for everyone. It would be a terrible loss to the fabric of Boulder, and that is why I'm here advocating to keep it in its current use. Thank you, and thank you so much for your work and service to Boulder.
Thank you.
Hi, I live at 891 12th Street, which is Marpa House, and we've already heard quite a bit about Marpa House, but I'd like to just come up here and speak from the heart about some of the points that make me want to see Marpa House stay in its current use as opposed to being changed to student housing. For 46 years, Marpa House has been an opportunity for low-income housing for all kinds of people in Boulder, such as teachers and nurses, painters, carpenters, people who live and work in our community, who are the veins and kind of the roots from which we can all enjoy our society. And if that were to go, I think it would be a terrible shame, and I think it would continue to kind of demarcate the shifts in Boulder that are happening, where it's a lot of wealthy people and a lot of students. And I think Marpa House right now serves as a really beautiful middle ground that maintains the integrity of what Boulder has been and what Boulder can be. And so, from the bottom of my heart, I just feel it would be a terrible shame that every person who walks by Marpa House and gets uplifted from the kind of intangible energy that exists there, that wouldn't happen anymore. And I think it would be a shame for everyone who could possibly come in contact with it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And I forgot a very important point, that there's an offer from the community, local nonprofit community, to buy Marpa House right now. And so it's a legitimate offer. And so we're requesting that any support that you could offer to keep Marpa House as it is and not turn into a student housing situation would be greatly appreciated. So, thank you.
Thank you. Wait, can I ask you a question about that offer? Just so that everybody knows, can you tell us just in the nature, what the nature of that offer was? And
Yes, it's been a collection of donations and loans from the community, which is trying to keep Marpa House as it is right now. So it's a lot of different donors and a lot of different people who are taking out loans. We're trying to keep it as it is.
Great, thank you. Oh, yeah?
Have they formed a nonprofit?
They have,
Okay.
yes.
So a 501c3?
Yes,
And it's a competitive offer?
it is, yes.
That's great.
Interesting. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of council. Charles Farrow with the Planning Department. So last week, we received a pre-application for the property located at 891 12th Street, which is known as the Marpa House. It was built in 1923 originally as a fraternity and is considered existing legal non-conforming and has served as the Marpa House for quite some time now. So pre-application is an administrative, kind of an informal process by where a property owner or a citizen can submit technical or process development related questions to staff. In about 2 weeks, we'll provide written responses, and typically we will sit down and meet with the applicant. And it's a step in the process that's designed to help inform any subsequent applications that may come in. So in this case, the applicants are asking some general questions around the residential conversion of the Marpa House, which right now is currently arranged as kind of a boarding house use where there's common bathrooms on the floors and there's individual bedrooms. And a few units that were added in 2010, and converting that into 16 three-bedroom units. So we don't have any plans, we just have a list of questions that they've asked us. We just routed the application yesterday for staff's review, so if there's any general questions about what's been submitted, I'm happy to respond.
But before we do that, can you just talk to us about the role of the city in this?
Sure. So
What levers we have, how the process plays out, et
yeah,
cetera?
at this point in pre-application, like I said, it's administrative, so no decision is rendered as part of this. There's no public hearing or public process. It's simply just an exchange of factual information between the property owner and staff. So that's where we are in the process now.
And keep going?
So depending on what it is
People
that-
want us to intervene, and I guess I want you to explain what would our levers be.
Depending on
to do
what it is
or not.
that's proposed, and again, we don't have a tremendous amount of information right now, most likely, the property would have to undergo a non-conforming use review, in which case it would be subject to call up by the planning board by any citizen or any member of the planning board, and then planning board's decision would be subject to call up by the council.
Great. Okay, we have some questions. Who is up first? Aaron?
Well, I think you answered it. I mean, just in terms of that, we do have a discretionary review process, right? So there are various points at which we could evaluate the proposal and say no if we felt like it was not inappropriate.
Right. I do want to be clear, though, that the kind of the essence of the non-conforming use review process is demonstrating that you're not creating any new impacts on the neighborhood. So if they came in with a ratcheted down submittal, it's possible that they could ask for an administrative process that, then there wouldn't be a public process. But from what I've been seeing, just in the basic information that's been submitted, it suggests that they'd be undergoing a non-conforming use review.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
So this building has been around a long time and is a significant kind of historic building in that neighborhood, even though it's not landmarked at this point. What options would the public have, or our landmarks board or commission or Historic Boulder have to take this on as a historic preservation landmark?
It's a great question. I checked in with our landmark staff this afternoon, and it's in a potential historic district, so it's not in a designated district. It's not a designated building, like you said.
Right.
But according to our staff, it likely has historic significance and could potentially be eligible for landmark designation. One of the other things I wanted to note is that the Landmarks Board is planning to talk about this under matters at their meeting on Thursday night.
Excellent. And when I read the pre-app, my understanding, and maybe I don't have this right, is that the applicant was interested in his pre-app of adding some structures onto the existing exterior of the house.
Right.
So it's not just an internal change in the house, but
Right.
it's an external.
There is a mention in the list of questions about a potential exterior addition. If it were, if an addition or any increase in floor area were proposed, it would be pushed into the non-conforming use review process. So, like I said, that's what the application suggests now.
Okay, and then another question I have is that, as I understand it, the house is kind of a communal house right now, and so they have like a communal kitchen.
Right.
And with the 16 three-bedroom apartments, would each one of those now have its own kitchen?
Again, absent any plans or any
Right.
additional detail, what's been submitted would suggest that they would be 16 three-bedroom standalone units, each with their own bathrooms, kitchens.
And would that present any kind of a fire hazard, or,
No, it'd be, again, pretty typical conversion.
okay. Okay, that's it for right now.
I think Mary was first. Well, it doesn't, yeah, we can get on the line anyway.
So I just wondered what the status was in terms of the ownership of the property. It's not quite clear.
So from what I understand, the property is under contract right now. I spoke with the architect who's representing the ownership group, and there's a contract pending, from what I understand.
So the group that spoke earlier, that could still happen. That's very, potentially that is,
From what I understand from the applicant, the property hasn't changed hands yet, so that could be a possibility.
someone has a different story behind you from the folks who spoke.
And
Favor.
in terms of a request for landmarking, who can that come from? Can that come from any members of the public? Does it have to come from the owner? Who does it come from?
I think it can come from members of the public, but typically it's something that grows out of the Landmarks Board review process. And like I said, they'll be discussing it tomorrow night under matters, because I think there's a feeling that it has some potential for landmark designation.
Okay, thank you.
I want to go back to the process here, because I wasn't on planning board, and most people in the audience probably weren't either, so I'm trying to understand what the process is. So they're in this pre-application, which is an informal advisory process, and you guys will express your opinion.
Right.
And then the applicant can then, if they choose to, based upon what you've seen, it sounds like you're predicting or speculating that they might file a use review application, which would go to the staff, and then ultimately could be called up by the planning board and ultimately called up by council. What roughly is, based on your workload right now, assuming they filed a use review application tomorrow or within a few days after you guys giving your advisory opinion, how long does it take before it gets to planning board and then ultimately to call up to council? Are we talking like 2 or 3 months? Or are we talking like 6
Typically about 90 days.
About 90 days. Okay, that's great. And then kind of different question. Let's say they don't get a very happy answer from you guys on this advisory review. Are there things that they can do that the buyer could do by right right now? And presumably the buyer could continue to do what the property is doing right now, right?
Correct.
Are there things that can be done with the property by right, that is without a use review approval, over and above what's done now, short of what this bigger 16 units is, but something in between? Is that possible?
I think technically there could be, but there'd be a lot of analysis to demonstrate that. They'd have to demonstrate equivalent occupancy, that they weren't increasing impacts with regard to noise, traffic, trash, parking. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into it. We also have some density or occupancy equivalents in our code that talk about how you convert a boarding house into more conventional apartment style units. We've done a number of them on the Hill over the years where boarding houses have converted, fraternity and sorority houses have converted to apartments. So it has been done by right. As long as you can demonstrate that there isn't any additional impacts. There is a lot of analysis that goes into that, but typically it results in a expansion of a non-conforming use, which, like I said, forces that use review application.
Okay, great. Thank you, helpful, Charles.
I have 2 more questions. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
You talk about, no additional impacts, but people have testified here tonight that the same owner has purchased similar type properties up on the Hill, and there are all kinds of violations associated with those buildings. When you do look at an application, are you, as a city, allowed to look at other properties this person owns and behavior or infractions on those properties?
No, typically not. That's not something that we would factor into our review. We're really bound by those criteria that are found in the use review.
And then my last question is, could you please restate when the Landmarks Board Commission will meet? Is it tomorrow or
Thursday, the 18th at 6 o'clock here in Chambers, I believe.
Okay.
And they'll be discussing on other matters. And the agenda should be available on the city's website.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you. Go ahead.
So just, Charles, the criteria that would be used for the non-conforming use review, what are those? And then we'll move on to the site review if there was one.
Found in section 9215 of the city's code, and they primarily, like I said, they address impacts. So visual impact, increases in traffic, noise, parking, trips. It's really, the criteria really relate to consistency with the zoning, consistency with the context of the neighborhood. It's really about context and impact.
So if it gets to that level and it were called up by the planning board, they would be using those same criteria then?
Correct.
Not site plan review criteria. So
Correct.
These are a different set of criteria. And if we were to call that from the planning board, it would be those same set of criteria.
That's correct.
Okay, and so that's a little unusual, right? Typically, this is done at an administrative level. I can't remember seeing one of these when I was on planning board.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual. I would say about 15 years ago, we were seeing applications to convert the remaining boarding houses that were on the Hill into more conventional units, but it's been a while since we've seen one.
Great. And has there ever been any interest by Boulder Housing Partners or Thistle in an arrangement like this? In other words, do we know if they own any boarding houses or similar facilities?
So I don't. In talking with Kurt Fernhaber from Housing, there have been some discussions with the current owners, but I don't know that they were able to make an arrangement. I don't know what the timing looked like.
Okay, and so, I mean, it seems like a worthwhile avenue for discussion. In fact, putting those organizations potentially together with the nonprofit that's been formed to see, because it's not clear, and I didn't want to ask, how much is the offer that the nonprofit has versus what the private parties, but it seems like circling up as much and just making sure that the nonprofits are aware of Thistle and are aware of Boulder Housing Partners and have that, in their head for maybe discussions.
And may I add, or Boulder Housing Coalition, since it's kind of a cooperative right now.
Right.
So that might be relevant as well. Aaron?
So Sam, to your point, I did reach out to Boulder Housing Partners about Marpa House, and they definitely, my understanding is they definitely see potential there, but they found that the property was under contract. So I think they let the owners know that they were interested. So I would definitely encourage folks here in the community who are working on this to get in contact with Boulder Housing Partners, because it could be that between the two of you, the current owner might be more interested in what you had to offer.
Yeah, and I agree with Suzanne. Boulder Housing Coalition as
Absolutely.
well might also be another one because they're so plugged into that. So yeah, that whole cluster because if this is currently affordable, preservation is one of the missions that we have, both for a city and for Boulder Housing Partners. So this would be an opportunity for preservation. It would require perhaps some negotiation with who's under contract right now, but there can always be deals made.
Is that good?
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Charles, this is a little out of normal, but when you, are you going to issue a written opinion when you?
We will, and we'll share it with the neighborhood.
And with council, that'd be
Absolutely.
great. Thank you. Okay.
You bet.
Great.
Friends of Marpa House, thanks so much for watching this video. Please come support us today, July 18th, at the Municipal Building, 1777 Broadway, where the Boulder Historic Landmarks Board is holding their monthly meeting and have added Marpa House to their agenda. Please come show broad community support. On this slide, you'll see a little bit of background on what's happening, and on the next slide, we've provided contact information to please get in touch with the community of Marpa House 501c3 nonprofit that is making a community-based offer to buy Marpa House, preserve it in its current use, and keep it as a precious part of the Boulder community. Thanks again.